Come take my hand, come join our strike. From Boston shot to dawn's early light, from Lexington to Tripoli, our fathers died, the Union to see. A common voice, a common fight, a brighter tomorrow, however dark the night. It's the Union that raised our banner. It's the Union, the future's hammer. It's the Union that made you and me. It's the Union that makes us free. Immigrants, natives and slaves, we fought each other. The Union to save. From Gettysburg to Normandy, we forged a world without slavery. From Rust Belt to Hollywood, shoulder to shoulder, right where we stood. It's the Union that raised our banner. It's the Union, the future's hammer. It's the Union that made you and me. It's the Union that makes us free. It's the Union that raised our banner. It's the Union, the future's hammer. It's the Union that made you and me. It's the Union that makes us free. Makes us free. If we all strike, Joe Hill survives, they won't break us. Stand side by side, I'll stand with you. Come strike with me, and our union will make us free.
Hello. Have you tried turning the Church of Korahora off and back on again? Welcome to the Church of Korahora. We're a church for godless people. So, of course, Jesus is out here fighting with me through technology. Sorry that took. This is. I'm gonna have to figure. I basically had to turn my camera back to full auto, and so like nothing. Okay, sometimes computers update by themselves now. And the recent update that my computer made was to decide to update the drivers for things that are connected to computers. And the the update that it did is that things connected to computers shouldn't work anymore. And so I had to restart my computer like right as we're actually going live, like 2 minutes before. I'm like, okay, great, shit, fuck, damn it, Jesus, fucked on a train by a goat. All right, I'll do it. Just do it, just do it. And I did it, got in and started things, and then the drivers that were working when I started it stopped working. Anyhow, how's it going? So now everything's bad and wrong, and we can officially begin. Fuck you, Jesus. Mind your own goddamn business. So here's how we're gonna go. Let me try reloading my script for today's sermon. How you guys been? It's been a while. We are back in the studio. You'll probably recognize it doesn't look the same as it did before. This was the old studio at the house where the kids are. When the ex lives with the kids, and all my art is down in St. George because we are on the 22nd having the Space After event in St. George, where I will be auctioning my artwork, and we will be auctioning the artwork from other people, from other that has been donated to benefit families that have been more or less abandoned by the Mormon polygamists down in southern Utah, and also, of course, to benefit people who are unsheltered, and especially people who who are shelter insecure. So that's on the 22nd. Those of you who are able to come out for that, it's going to be a great event. We're going to be have an opportunity to hear Megan Connor sing, and we are going to also. I'm also going to be making announcements, including a new announcement of a new festival of the Church of Korahor. Church of Korahor has holidays now, and I'm very excited about this one. So, in any event, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to try and get my sermon loaded up here, so we're going to do another. We're going to do another hymn while I get that loaded up here. Hold on.
Wait a minute! This Exmo's got something to say?
Oh, big surprise!
Oh, fuck off. Golden angels
Show the fruit
selling Jesus.
in an Armani suit.
Will a man rob God? Holy dividends turning profits
Into Caesar's friends.
Hosanna shout,
Shout.
for Jesus IPO revelation on the line.
On the line,
Hold the phone.
sing it loud, loud. Mammon Tabernacle Choir, stack the pews. With glass and fire, follow the prophet. Trumpet, raise the rent. Tithe the poor until they're spent.
Will the meek really inherit the earth? First shake them down,
Down.
for all they're worth. Build a den of
Sometimes you just need it, you know what I mean? Okay, so we're just going to do this. This is The Fortunate Son. This is the 43rd-ish Godless Sermon of the Church of Korihor. Discovered a few weeks ago that back in 2025, I apparently just skipped a couple of sermon numbers, and so now we're we'll call it 43. And when people actually go back one day and count them, we'll say, "Don't count them. Don't count them." So, tell me, don't tell me if you remember this one. Do you remember back in 2021? There was a little thing that happened in Washington, D.C. It was just a couple of months after rioters took control of the Capitol building in Washington, chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Anybody remember that? As you can imagine, that had an effect on Mike Pence. Apparently in a really big way. But almost nobody really cared back then. It's like, yeah, well, people who had once supported him said, well, you didn't support the MAGA when push came to shove. You didn't follow orders like you were supposed to. And he decided to call Dan Quayle, of all people, if you remember that, called Dan Quayle and said, "This is what I've been told to do." And Dan Quayle, of all people, may have actually saved the Republic. Weird. It's a weird time, right? Dan Quayle told him, "That's against the Constitution. You don't do things that are against the Constitution. Don't do that." Told them, "Mike, show them that you're better than that you won't do it, not for anybody." And so Mike Pence earned himself the ire of his political base. Now, I don't tell people how to vote, and I don't believe that anybody in a spiritual role should be telling people how to vote. And luckily, today, I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I wouldn't have done it back then if the Church of Korihor existed back then. But, fortunately for us, we didn't have to, because we wouldn't be founded for another 4 years. But back in 2021, by April of that year, Mike Pence had decided that the Heritage Foundation was the problem. So he's nowhere near as dumb as he looks. That's two things Mike Pence got right in the same year, if you ask me. And I'll tell you why that's not political. That is a moral question. The Heritage Foundation for a long time has, in fact, been run by spoiled rich boys who have absolutely no interest at all in improving America or improving standards of living for Americans. As far as they're concerned, the only thing that matters is the spiritual well-being of the souls of Americans when they all go to hell or go to heaven. It is a political organization that's run like a cult. And so when Mike Pence apparently decided back in April 2021 that they are run too much like a cult, and now they're actually hurting America's interests rather than actually benefiting America. And lo and behold, of course, it took how many hundreds or thousands of people to storm the Capitol building shouting, "Hang Mike Pence," while carrying picket signs that say, "Trump sent us," and "Make America Great Again." For him to decide, I don't think that the Heritage Foundation, I don't know that they're sending their best. And so he decided to create a competitor to the Heritage Foundation called Advancing American Freedom. That's pretty much the most boring name anyone can think of. And I am certain that that was on purpose, because you see, you had no reason to even think about Mike Pence, right? And I'm sure that's exactly how he liked it. I remember when this started and people said, he created an alternative to the Heritage Foundation? Is he out of his mind? They're going to run right over him. Are there enough conservatives in America who care about Mike Pence or the way Mike Pence sees the world to turn away from their very well financed MAGA base and their MAGA movement. What what is happening? He's got to be out of his mind. And then we just stop talking about it because who knows and who even cares, right? But then Nick Fuentes back then was all about the MAGA movement. Now you remember Nick Fuentes. He is the incel anti-Semite who managed to get a Thanksgiving dinner in 2022 with Donald Trump that was apparently arranged by Milo Yiannopoulos and Kanye. So that's a good sign you're in bad company. Suddenly, Trump had a political problem as soon as he had this dinner with Nick Fuentes. And it turns out Donald Trump relearned, I would suggest, the very difficult problem in the modern political world that you can have dinner with an anti-Semite once, and turns out, in the eyes of the public, you are an anti-Semite, no matter how many Jewish grandchildren you have, Mr. Trump. And so all of a sudden, they had to turn on Nick Fuentes. Now, in the midst of this, I just want to point out, Mike Pence and his people at Advancing American Freedom were just watching and biding their time as they watched the Heritage Foundation / incoming Trump campaign for 2024 suddenly have to turn on this arrogant child whose whole shtick is how much he is an anti-Semite. Of course, I'll get a groiper in the comments on this video later who will say, "Oh, all of a sudden Nick Fuentes is an anti-Semite." Yeah, look at the things he says. You don't have to search far. He is a hater and a white supremacist. He's proudly white supremacist. And as is always the case, the supporters of white supremacy, their people don't like to call they want it to be called something else. But white supremacists is not it's not strange or difficult to figure out. You just got to step back and say, is this white supremacy? And lo and behold, there it is. So after Trump's people had abandoned Nick Fuentes, who was their boy, they loved him back before the media exposed who exactly he was and what exactly he liked to teach and preach to his desperate rabble of incels. Nick Fuentes decided to kick back and foment revenge, as all mature, entitled children will tend to do. And over time, he became more and more passionately anti-MAGA. But again, who cares, right? Okay, Mike Pence gets a chance to raise, how many millions or billions of dollars from rich billionaires and run his Advancing American Freedom group, his PAC, basically, whether or not they go by that as a PAC. There's alternative version of the Heritage Foundation, but who even cares? Nick Fuentes falls out of favor because MAGA turns against him. Who even cares? And then Tucker Carlson did. Apparently, in 2025, October of last year, Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes on his program. And it did not go the way that MAGA wanted. In fact, MAGA didn't want it at all because, of course, Tucker Carlson, as recently as 2024, was touring with Donald Trump, promoting, stumping for Donald Trump, and they have this tenuous relationship, him and Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, especially given that remember that when Tucker Carlson pushed those MAGA conspiracy theories from about the 2020 election, that's when he got himself ousted at Fox News and ended up going out on his own and having to start basically his own little channel. And that channel apparently isn't doing that well and needs to garner attention. He needs to start a controversy. So, of course, what do you do when you want to garner more attention than you deserve? You get somebody who's controversial on your program, and then you try to raise hell. You try to get your own base riled up about What are you doing? Don't platform him. Then it looks like he is part of our movement, like he has something to do with us. So it was a publicity stunt, effectively. Either that or Tucker Carlson agrees with Nick Fuentes, which is the worst possible thing out there. So I'm just going to go ahead, even though if you watch that interview, he leads it off by saying, "You and I agree with about a lot of things," and then they just, who cares? Again, it's all these things that are going on in the conservative world. So I generally go, like, tell me how it's immediately important. My brain shuts down because I disagree with their values, and that's my personal thing, right? But so I was happy to just say, "Oh, great! See that they keep coming up together in the cesspool, in the camp following of the GOP." And you keep seeing these little events crop up. It's like, well, now you see where this is going. And so now several key people. Now here's why it matters. So that was October of last year. Between that Nick Fuentes interview and now, the Heritage Foundation has been in absolute burn down mode because Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, came out and defended this when people said, "Are you going to do anything about Tucker Carlson meeting with Nick Fuentes and painting the whole MAGA movement with Nick Fuentes and his problems?" And he came forward and said, "I think that it's great that they're having this conversation. You're never going, somebody has to have the conversation. Why not have it? Why not let Tucker Carlson have it? That's great." And the fact that he defended Tucker Carlson meant that in this since then, they have seen the top brass at the Heritage Foundation suddenly move over to advancing American freedom. So now the Heritage Foundation's got more money than God. They're out there. They've won the day. They've got their Project 2025. They got Donald Trump elected. They got everything that they wanted. And the world that you and I live in apparently is that world. I got to be honest with you. I'm not loving it. Have you tried turning America off and back on again? But I didn't win politically, obviously. And I have to live with those consequences. And well, I wasn't running, but I feel like I lost anyway. But the point is, now you've got the top brass at the Heritage Foundation leaving the Heritage Foundation and going over to work for Mike Pence, and their man Kevin Roberts and his staff over there, the Heritage Foundation, they are furious about it because, of course, these are the people who are raising their money, establishing their political connections, building those backdoor channels into Washington. Now all those people are going to go be working for Mike Pence. So it turns out maybe people should have paid more attention to Mike Pence doesn't really love the fact that when he was at the height of political power and the central seat of political power, all of a sudden, one moment where he said, "I'm going to stand with the courage of my convictions as a conservative and say, if it's against the Constitution, I'm against it." And then next thing it turns out is that you have all of these MAGA bros, these Heritage Foundation bros, storming the Capitol, shouting, "Hang Mike Pence." And it had an effect on the man, an effect that apparently turned into a vendetta that's been burning pretty hot now for 6 years. Well, going on, I guess that's 5 years. So for 5 years, this group that nobody has been paying attention to, nobody's thinking about, they have been biding their time, raising their money, having their meetings, and waiting for the moment where the Heritage Foundation finally screws up, as they are guaranteed to do. And apparently, this Nick Fuentes interview, of all things, is exactly that. Because ever since Kevin Roberts basically came out in support of Tucker Carlson working, having this interview with Nick Fuentes. Now all of these people, the key movers, are movers and shakers of the Heritage Foundation. They're moving over to advancing American freedom. And we may actually be having all the conversations people had. Remember back in 2024 and 2025 in the election cycle, how we talked about Project 2025 all the time and how shocking it was, right? We may soon be talking like that, but about AAF, and the Heritage Foundation may end up in the rearview mirror. Who knows how long before they, I don't know, get some other firebrand and return back to prominence. And it's left me in this slump lately of saying, when are we going to learn the Epstein Island lesson? When are we going to, how are we going as a people, morally speaking, going to let what's been revealed about Jeffrey Epstein and the most connected people in both major parties in America and business, in the large established businesses, the most established corporations in the world, Microsoft and Google, for hell's sake? How long before we find out how many Facebook people are involved with Jeffrey Epstein? How many Uber people? How many people? And who knows what organizations? Who knows how many Apple people are involved? How many people over at Disney are involved with Jeffrey Epstein and his crew? We don't even know. This week I got into quite a controversy that has been turning some heads in small circles when I pointed out you are literally 1 degree away with the new selection, the selection of the new Mormon apostle that just happened a couple days ago in the Mormon church. They ordained a new apostle, and everybody wants to talk about, wow, this new apostle is so young that he is almost certain to outlive all of his predecessors. He's got to go through a dozen men, but that dozen men, they all have to basically pass away. This is the wisdom of the Mormon church. 12 men have to kick the bucket. They have to go to the harem and the great beyond in order for this guy to become the prophet. And fortunately, if that is part of his ambition, most of them are in their 80s and 90s. And so it's very plausible that within 10 years, this new guy could become the prophet of the Mormon church. His name is Clark Gilbert. And it turns out, okay, so what is it about this guy? The news being said about this guy and the interviews that have been done with him is that basically it's basically an endorsement by the new prophet, President Oaks, who's one of the more conservative Mormon prophets ever, and already shaping up to be. Basically decided on who his successor is going to be, and that successor is going to see probably at least a couple of decades of leadership in the church, where the Mormon church returns back to its conservative roots and turns away from any inkling that they're going to make progress in kind of a socially progressive way. And so now that's what people are talking about with this guy, Clark Gilbert. And I am the only one pointing out, and he worked for Larry Summers, who is dirty in the Epstein files. How is nobody pointing out that guy taught at Harvard Business School when Larry Summers was the president of Harvard, and he reported directly, this guy, Clark Gilbert, reported to Kim B. Clark, who is the dean of Harvard Business School, again, while working for Larry Summers. And when Larry Summers, who is dirty, filthy in the Epstein files, left Harvard, they left too and went to BYU, Idaho, and started running BYU, Idaho, right in time for the lead up, those years where Glenn Beck was starting to look to revitalize, the Mormon brand outside of, connected to the Mormon Church only tangentially, only on the outside surface here, and wants to kind of rebrand Mormonism, returning it to its conservative roots, and ends up with Tim Ballard as his solution. And because he has access to President M. Russell Ballard at the time, he was able to connect the actual Mormon church prophets, the actual church leadership, into the Visions of Glory cult through this guy, Tim Ballard. And while all that is going on, the Mormon church was effectively promoting it, was promoting all of these things. Who knows how many people were involved and actually knew, this guy, Tim Ballard, he's not everything he claims to be, but, it's helping our image. So right now we're just going with it. And this guy and this new guy, this new apostle now, isn't it, Clark Gilbert? He's part of the instrumentation to make that happen. And it just so happens he worked for Larry Summers when Larry Summers was plotting and scheming with Jeffrey Epstein. And does it mean anything? I don't know. I got a comment on a video, just our video just from the other day, talking about, okay, this is typical. Somebody posted this in the comments on one version of the live and said, typical ex-Mormon nonsense or something like that. Just a bunch of random correlated stuff. And I replied on that no, it's correlation, not causation. Did I not make that clear? I have this matrix I put together that shows all of these first and second, third degree associations of the mutual associations between Tim Ballard and Jeffrey Epstein. And apparently the Ballardites have found it and started to leave comments because they are upset that I am doing this. Do you think I didn't know I was going to get that? Even you have these spoiled rich boys who are running the world, and that's not new. America was founded by spoiled rich boys who got tired of being told that they weren't, of being told that they couldn't be in charge. That's the true origins of this country, and it's kind of just been that ever since. Spoiled rich boys telling off governments and telling off kings that, the people should be in control. But really what we end up doing is just passing control from an established hierarchy of spoiled rich boys to another establishment of spoiled rich boys who think that they can get away with whatever they want. And that's the whole Jeffrey Epstein lesson right there. The Epstein Island lesson is that when we continue to endorse the propaganda and believe the propaganda of spoiled rich boys who get out of jail free, how many people, how much of this week have we spent talking about when are they going to press charges? Where are the charges? It's been, as of next Monday, it has been 2 weeks since the cause of death on the on the the coroner's report for Alex Preddy was listed by the medical examiner in Minneapolis as homicide. No charges. Not really even an inkling that they're working toward charges. No charges. We just live in a world where some people are above the law. You have now, according to Jamie Raskin, now that they've had an opportunity to see the unredacted Jeffrey Epstein files, he comes to find out that where previously, if he searched the redacted Jeffrey Epstein files, that he found Donald Trump's name 35,000 times. When he gets into the unredacted files, Donald Trump's name comes up over 1 million times. And turns out, if you want to know why, as people like me go through the Epstein files, and almost every email or file I come across is, wow, that's a lot of redactions. Why did the person's name get redacted up here in the address bar, but the person's name is clearly in the actual email? To wit, we got that email I pointed out that says that's arranging payment for a student, for a young person with she, her pronouns, attending BYU Idaho in 2011, when again the new Mormon apostle Clark Gilbert. I have to keep remembering his name because he worked for a guy named Clark, and his name is Clark. Clark Gilbert. And it's confusing. One of them has to change. I'm going to have to nickname one of them. I'm going to have to pull a Donald Trump and nickname one of them. Anyways, Clarky Gilbert. That's probably not going to be the nickname. Clark Gilbert. He has to. He was actually running BYU Idaho when that arrangement was being made in 2011. After he had left in 2006, working for Larry Summers at Harvard, where Jeffrey Epstein and attended, and where apparently he and Larry Summers started to really strike up this friendship that became everything that the Epstein files are about. Well, of course, it's not just him. It's also Bill Clinton, turns out. It was Woody Allen for sure. And it may actually extends as far, apparently, as to affect also Elena Kagan, and President Obama's appointed Supreme Court justice, and apparently also Kathy Rumler, President Obama's White House legal counsel. And it's like, do we get it yet? I mean, are you going to get it yet? Do we as people get it yet? This isn't a political problem. Sure, there are policies that are issues, but this is not a political problem. This is a moral problem. We as a people have decided that at some core level to buy into the billionaire fantasy, to buy into the lifting tide raises all ships philosophy that has hurt us again and again. And now the Heritage Foundation has to recapture all of our hearts, not by deciding how we're going to vote, not by deciding, directly anyways, not by deciding what movements we're going to finance with our money, not by deciding who should be enshrined in the leadership directly. They're putting together another Project 2025 they've released that is a Project 2025 for 2026, because of course we didn't get enough with Project 2025. We need more project. So now there's a Project 2026. And as you likely have heard, these are some of the moral principles that the Heritage Foundation wants us to understand, wants us to believe on a moral level, and let it not be said that this is merit, that this is, sorry, I'm reading while trying to think, that this is religion. So under marriage and relationships, mandatory marriage boot camp. If you don't know, they're basically talking about that you're going to have to recommend that cohabiting couples, people who live together unmarried, living together in sin, should have to go through a marriage boot camp to get them on the road to getting married. It's like you took somebody's conspiracy theory touting uncle, the uncle that doesn't get invited to Thanksgiving anymore. It's like you took that guy and that uncle and put him in charge of everything. That they want to start discouraging online dating and replacing all online dating platforms. That won't be hard. Most people who use that dating apps hate them anyways. But replacing them with what? And I just don't see how anybody's going. If you ask yourself, what will the Heritage Foundation replace online dating apps with? There's nothing good that's going to come out of that. There's no possible good solution that's going to come out of that question. They are they're going to oppose same-sex marriage. That's not new. They've always done that. But they're now pushing this narrative that pushes once again, as Project 2025 did, that children should only be married sorry. This isn't about Mormons this time. Sorry, forgot. That children should only be raised in married homes, of parents that are married, a man and a woman, a father and mother. And then they want to eliminate all abortion access. That's not new. And they want, but it says that they want to reduce demand and supply for abortion at all stages, meaning restricting or banning abortion from conception to all 9 months. So we've come away from the day, long gone are the days where they were just talking again and again about late term abortion. Then they want the nuclear family as government priority, making the traditional nuclear family, married heterosexual parents with children, the centerpiece of all American policy. So this is what they're calling restoring the family home. Okay. They want to position the traditional family as central to securing America's future, likely involving economic and social policies that favor traditional family structures and other living arrangements. And among those things is something very familiar. Among those priorities that we're seeing come out are that the Heritage Foundation now apparently wants us to reduce Pell Grants. Do you know how many people in this country are only able to go to college because of Pell Grants? They want to eliminate Pell Grants as much as possible, and they want to eliminate uh, all student loan debt forgiveness. They want to just do away with any forgiveness for student loan debts. You took out this loan, you're going to have to live with it. Presumably because they want younger people to realize if you're scared that borrowing $100,000 or more to go to college is going to ruin your future, that's smart for you to be worried about that because it will. It totally will. So take the jobs that you're lucky enough for us to give you and get married. And this is where it becomes for me this moral crisis that we're seeing crop up again and again, which is that, like I said a while ago, the Mormon Church, one of the first decisions that the new Mormon prophet Dallin Oaks has made, one of his first announcements he made before he was even officially the prophet, when he's leading the church as the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, was that they were going to reduce the age of women serving in missions in the Mormon Church down to 18, the same as the boys. You see, those of you out there, either here or in the future, when I went on a mission for the Mormon Church in 1999, November of 1999, so just barely November 99, I was 19 years old. And I served with sister missionaries in my mission, not very many, but there were a few. And they were all girls who were 21 or older. Now, why? It's always been speculated that and believed that the reason why the girls went later and the boys went younger in the Mormon Church on missions was exactly that dynamic. We had maybe one sister missionary in my mission in Peru. We had like one sister missionary for every some 10 elders, every 10 boys. There was one woman. And they had and we kind of had to walk around, kind of treat them almost like they had the plague, it felt like, to me anyways, because of course we're not supposed to be thinking about girls, we're not supposed to be dating girls, we're not supposed to be having any contact with girls while we're on our mission. We're supposed to be keeping our minds focused on the work, and well, what distracts 19-year-old boys, presumably, in more than girls. Never mind that meanwhile you had all these boys in these 19-year-old, 20-year-old young men, 21-year-old young men, living together in pairs, just the pair of them, hanging out most of the time in our underwear, just the pair of us. But certainly, luckily, there are no gay Mormons, so that definitely wasn't going to become a problem as far as keeping our minds off of sex. But that dynamic of like this 1 to 10 ratio was quite clearly the reason why they had this policy that said that the girls start going at 21, the boys start going at 19, so that when the boys get home from our missions, 19 to 21, the young women who might be thinking about going on a mission will see and may probably sent a boyfriend on a mission if they had a boyfriend, would see that this young man just got home from his mission after 2 years of going out door to door or on bicycle or on foot, and they're looking pretty good. And just got back in many of our cases from a mission, even from a foreign country. Even when I came home from my mission to Peru, I got to tell you, there was a solid like 2-3 weeks where it was the Elder Rollins Open season, and these women that hardly noticed that I existed when I was 19. At 21, recently returned missionary, I was prime marriage material. All of a sudden, I could get a date with anybody that I wanted. I had people coming to me and talking to me about, now that you're back, you should be thinking about getting married. And we've come up, it just so happens that so and so actually is really interested in you, wanted to know if you were. All of a sudden, I had people's parents suggesting to me that I should be dating their daughter. Maybe there's something here. And the objective was to get young women married off and get them convinced that your mission in life is making babies, making Mormon babies, and bringing up a generation of Mormon babies. So then all of a sudden and then, but of course the church must have seen, sorry, a part of their problem became that this gap year between 18 and 19, roughly when most young men are graduating high school and then going on missions, was that there was this year where those young men had time to think about, is this really the best way to set myself up for the rest of my life? Maybe I want to take a year off. And they take a gap year and try and figure out what I'm going to do with my life before I go to college, before I go on a mission or anything. And it turns out they're taking that gap year to decide, I think I'm going to go to college. I think I'm going to try and get a career. I'm going to try and set myself up for a better future. Then we talk about getting married. The same thing with these young women, 18, 19 years of age. If they had no opportunity to go on a mission until they were 21, they started going to nursing school or vocational schools. They started going to college. They started getting degrees. And even inside the Mormon paradigm, and we're seeing this across the board in America, but even inside the Mormon group, you start to find more young women were going to college than young men. And you have these young women getting educated, which is a fantastic thing. And they're getting careers, which is a fantastic thing. And the church said, oh, I guess we're going to go ahead and lower the age of missionaries to 18. Oh, so that they don't, so they don't have time to get into trouble. That's going to dissuade them, so that they can keep their missionary numbers up. But more importantly, from their perspective, so they get these young people married off earlier, especially if the young men are getting back from their missions at 20 instead of 21. And now all of a sudden they've decided, yeah, let the girls go at 18 as well. On the one side, people are very excited. There are a lot of young women in the church who want to serve missions. And previously they thought they couldn't get a chance at it. Now they're going to get a chance to go on a mission. When President Oaks was asked, why that sudden decision? Why that all of a sudden? He said rather explicitly, oh, so we can get these girls married younger. You see how yes, it's correlation and not necessarily causation. Did somebody at the Heritage Foundation, did Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation call up Dallin H. Oaks and say, I want you to start getting these young Mormons married off earlier so that they're not going to college and getting smart? Probably not. I wouldn't put it past them. But no, I'm not suggesting that that's what happened. It's correlated, not causally linked. But look at what's happening. Enough correlation between this, of movement between people who are all moving in the same circles, suddenly all doing the same thing. It doesn't have to be coordinated by any one individual to see exactly the reason why the Heritage Foundation exists, and now apparently advancing American freedom. Mike Pence, change that name, dude. That's a terrible name. I got that you probably did it to slip under the radar because I mean it makes your mind go numb just saying it. Advancing American freedom. Call it Mike's Super Rich Boy Club. Just call it something really easy to remember. I'm sure that you named it that way for a reason, but now it's time. Now you've got the Heritage Foundation's people. I'm sure you're getting the Heritage Foundation's money, which is really what they're upset about. And you're getting their political influence. You can name it whatever you want now. Call it the Jesus Foundation or something. There's even, I don't know if you know about this, there's even a foundation that's in the conservative circles called Heavenly Fathers Foundation. That's a real thing in the world. You can look it up. Heavenly Fathers Foundation. Okay. I mean, wasn't that supposed to be the church? Oh, okay, whatever. But the exact reason why the Heritage Foundation exists, the exact reason why advancing American freedom exists, is to shape the moral agenda and the moral beliefs of a nation and of a people into believing some pretty central core ideas and teaching them to younger people and getting younger people to make these decisions on the basis of these same spoiled rich boys that have been making the decisions all along. It's the same group. You can look into their donors and you'll see the same 5-6 families in this community, in this foundation, are the same 5 and 6 in that foundation. If it's not the same family, it's the corporations that they work for. If it's not the corporations they work for, it's where they go to church. It's the influence that they have in Washington. You got this network of people who nobody has to be organizing it. Doesn't have to be any conspiracy. It's that they have the same values, and they want those same values reiterated down into the rest of society. And when I say down, I very specifically mean down. What are we saying? Down. Economically down. You have old money coming up in the world, or seeing new money coming up in the world, and they want to see that new money in American family, in the American voting structure, in the American political elite, they want to see that the new money comes from the families that believe the same religious values as the old money. And that's how they maintain power generation to generation to generation. And the problem with it is that whether it's Republicans or Democrats, for me, I have to say, who really cares? It all came out in the Epstein files. It all came out in Epstein Island. Who was there? Donald Trump was there. Who else was there? Bill Clinton was there. Oh. Who else was there? There's some possibility, apparently, that Brett Kavanaugh may be some way connected. One of the things I've been doing, I've been collecting a few of these Epstein files as I've been creating this matrix, and I keep seeing this name come up again and again and again. What do we do about Brett Kavanaugh? There was was it Alan Dershowitz? No, it was let me just pull it up real quick here. I'm trying to remember the person. I've been consuming so much of this Epstein file content. Frankly, it's been a little depressing. Kenneth Starr. Thank you. I looked at it. I just thanked my own computer. Even though I'm feuding with this computer. We're gonna have to have a talk computer. Anyway, you guys remember Ken Starr, right? The guy who ran the investigation, the impeachment investigation, the special counsel ran the impeachment investigation into Bill Clinton back in the 90s. Over what? Monica Lewinsky. No, it was supposed to be over Whitewater, but he had the power to investigate anything he wanted. Didn't find nearly enough to make hay about the Whitewater scandal, which was a real thing and was something actually worth some attention. but it wasn't nearly as scandalous as Monica Lewinsky, which, when you look back on it now, seems pretty tame, right? What happened? Oh, the president got a blowjob in the Oval Office from an intern. It was this young, impressionable woman, and if the president of the United States tells her to do it, then she's going to do it because she's young and impressionable. Yeah, that's all true. But it's like, this was an adult person, having a sexual affair with another adult person who was her boss. And it just so happens the most powerful man in the world, arguably. And a man who is dirty in the Epstein files. They didn't know any of that then. That same guy that ran that and exposed that and wanted Donald Trump, got to revert back to 1990s, wanted Bill Clinton impeached and removed from office. That guy, Ken Starr, was Jeffrey Epstein's vetting guy, apparently. Basically working on behalf of who knows who. Jeffrey Epstein was vetting people to become Supreme Court justices. And he was doing it, apparently had some role to play in it with Elena Kagan. Does he have anything to do with the selection of Elena Kagan? I don't know yet. So far as I have seen, he had no actual direct access to Barack Obama, thank goodness. But he was very well connected with Barack Obama's White House legal counsel, a part of his legal counsel, Kathy Rumler. And one email, and I discovered this, as I talked about on Friday, those of you who were here, the thing that I discovered, I wasn't looking for Kathy Rumler, who, by the way, quit her job at Goldman Sachs in shame over these Epstein files just 2 days ago, because it turns out she very likely had a romantic relationship with Jeffrey Epstein while she was working for Obama. And I wasn't looking for her. I didn't even know who she was. I'm sure I've seen her name, but I was like, okay, she's White House legal counsel. Who cares? She didn't have any reason to surface in my memory or brain. And certainly it didn't occur to me to think I should be looking for this person, for a woman who worked for Barack Obama, in the Epstein files. That wasn't even in my brain, to go looking for this person. I found her when I found out that while Larry Summers was president of Harvard University overall, the dean of Harvard Law, in hierarchy, the connecting point between Larry Summers and Alan Dershowitz, which connects back to that Tim Ballard thing and everything else, is the connecting point was the dean of Harvard Law, and that was Elena Kagan. And I discovered that. I said, well, throw Elena Kagan into the Epstein files and see what comes out. And one of the first links I hit, if not the first link I hit, was an email from Kathy Rumler to Jeffrey Epstein personally, where he had invited her to come out either for Yom Kippur or for some other ceremony, some other high holy day. Invited her to come out and said, well, I was thinking you could come out with Woody, meaning Woody Allen, and Soon Yi, his daughter wife. And sorry, but that's not strictly true, but it's true. It's close enough to true. You all remember the Woody Allen thing, right? Do we talk about it? Let's not. And he says, why don't you come out and have dinner with me and Woody, with us, presumably him and Ghislaine Maxwell, and Woody Allen and Soon Yi, and then leaves it open for what her ideas and suggestions are. And she says, Elena Kagan, ? And it blew my mind. It blew my mind, because we get this. We do buy into the propaganda that says this is about what the Republicans want, or this is about what the Democrats want. But it does turn out to be more true than you think, that it's the same group of rich kids all associating with each other, and R's and D's have nothing to do with it. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that Republican parties and Democrat parties don't matter. Oh, it matters. It matters a great deal, of course. But this isn't a political question at this pace. This is a moral question. You've got the same people on Jeffrey Epstein's island, and if you think none of them are connected to the Heritage Foundation, you're out of your mind. But we can get it into our heads to say, well, people at the Heritage Foundations are all Christians. Christians don't do the things that Jeffrey Epstein was doing. He had Christians there. Bill Clinton's a Christian. He's proudly Christian. He always has been. I mean, why shouldn't that be the case? Why is it surprising? The moral values of the Heritage Foundation suddenly are shifting towards, let's get young women married younger. 3 years ago, when you had state lawmakers saying maybe we should change the laws about child brides and acknowledge and understand that child brides aren't always such a dirty and terrible thing. And you only had, in cases like, wasn't it in Virginia? There was like one person, or it was either Virginia or Kentucky. I want to say. In any event, now I'm remembering it from past Godless sermons. But a lot of these things you block out of your mind thinking, are we really talking about child brides right now? You only had like one state lawmaker come out to say, I think that it's not so bad that you have child brides. And the whole world turned on him politically. The whole world turned on this guy. And it's like, yeah, because the moral basis of our entire fabric of our society is that it is beneath us as Americans to attempt to get young women married off as children, obviously, so that they can just become slaves, as baby making slaves and emotional slaves to men their entire lives. That's disgusting. We ought to remember that they are human beings and treat human beings, I don't know, with dignity and respect, because they are, and hope for their future, because all men and women are created equal. This is 3 years ago. This was a no-brainer. Now we've got one foundation that is full on stating we need to get these girls married off before they can go to college. Because they go to college, they're never going to get married at all. Because it turns out, and this is borne out by the statistics, women who get a college education are more likely to be the ones who end marriages early on the basis that their partner doesn't pull his weight. And it turns out, what does that mean? That only men who don't pull their weight in a marriage are getting married to women who have college educations? Doesn't seem likely. It's more likely most women feel like the men they're married to don't pull their own weight, that they're not pulling their weight in the emotional labor. They don't pull their own weight in raising the kids, in doing the chores, doing the housework, that the men they're equally yoked with aren't feeling equally yoked to them. I wrote a song about this, a Godless hymn for us to use in uncoupling ceremonies just a couple of weeks ago, called Love's Labor Lost. And it just so happens at that time, I talked about this, I think last week, that I had mentioned to my wife when I came up for my ex-wife, I came up here to see my kids, and she happened to have her date was canceled. And she happened to mention to me, she's like, I'm frustrated because I finally have some time off, some time to myself, and to do what I want, and my date canceled. And I said, oh, well, I put the kids down to bed, and they're happy, they're fed and happy and feeling good. Let's go to the bar and just get a drink. And so I went and had a drink with my ex-wife, and it was nice, and we connected. And I happened to mention to her, I said, it's funny, I didn't hear anything from you when I posted on my Facebook the song that I wrote about you, which is not Love's Labor Lost. It was The Girl I Remember. And she's like, "Song? What are you talking about?" I'm like, "I wrote a song about you and I published it. It's not that I expected you to see it. It's not that I need you to listen to it or hear it or like it. I don't. I just thought you would like it if you heard it, but I did it for me." I'm like, this is basically my uncoupling ceremony. I'm kind of experimenting with is maybe music could be a big part, could be a part of an options for one of the options for how do you do an uncoupling ceremony? How do you spiritually move into a future where you are divorced? And I thought this would be a fun way for me because I like to write music, as you guys know. I write the hymns of the Church of Korihor. So far, I'm the only one. I'll take them though. You guys, any of you guys out there writing songs for us? I want to see them, and because I'd love it. I'd love to get some more. And so she's like, "Well, where is it?" And she starts running through, songs that I've posted on TikTok. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I posted it in there a few weeks ago on TikTok. I don't remember." And and she started going through TikTok and Facebook, and she finds "Love's Labor Lost." This was the next day, and she said, "Is this it? This is the song that's about me?" And I was like, "Love's Labor? No, no, because Love's Labor Lost is all about a woman who leaves her husband because he doesn't pull his weight, because he puts all the labor on her." And she's like, This one wasn't about me?" And I said, "No, it's The Girl I Remember. It's a really sweet song." And she's like, "Oh, because I feel like this one's about me." I was like, "Oh, really?" And she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Yeah, this sounds a lot like me." Okay. All right. All right. All right. I said, "First of all, ouch. I wrote that song to be critical about other men while being self aware, at least enough to know, yeah, that was kind of me too. That for 20 years I was married to the same woman. And many times in those subtle moments, it's those quiet moments where somebody has to step up and do this because it has to be done. And you know in your heart that as a man, I knew in my heart that if I just sit here and wait long enough, Molly will do it because it has to be done. And she'll have a good attitude about it. But I know it's as inconvenient for her to step up and do this thing as it is for me. But I'll step up and do it. I'll be the one to do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna say, "No, baby, you've had enough. You've done enough today. You've got enough on your plate." But I'm tired, she's tired. And that moment that comes up where she goes, "It's okay. I'll do it." And you get into this rut, you get into this habit of being able to say, "Ah, baby, you're the best," and then let her do it. I laugh, but I'm not. It's not amusing. It's really shameful. It's really. I feel really guilty about it. I felt guilty about it in the moment. There were many times I can remember where I thought, "Oh man, I am such an asshole." And very not nearly as many times that I pointed out to her, that I confessed to her and pointed out and said, "I feel really bad that I made you do that. I feel so bad that I'm going to try and do better." There were times that I said that throughout our marriage, and I do feel like Molly appreciated that. But in the end, after 20 years of it, that was when she said, "But now we've had enough. We have to move on from this paradigm because if I'm going to be the one doing as much work as I'm doing, um, then I don't need your problems too." And so that's when we started to talk about divorce. And since then, I am aware now, and I don't know how true it is, of the privilege that I'm enjoying about how healthy a thing it has been for me and my ex-wife to sorry, just making sure. Just listening in on the kids. The kids are starting to stir for the day. Um, about how healthy it has been for both Molly and I to just move on from our marriage in the most peaceful way and with mutual love and affection for each other decide, this is going to be a good move for us. It's a good move for you and it's a good move for me. And it's us moving in the direction that we naturally are going in, and we can do this. We can figure it out together. And our divorce has been more of a team effort probably than most of the things we did while we were married. And I get that for most people out there, that's not what it's like. And I'm trying to not, oh, what's the word? Rub it in anybody's faces, maybe. I don't know. But I believe that we can model more loving and compassionate ways of ending a marriage. I think we can do better. I just became very aware of those people you watching on the in a portrait mode, maybe getting a very close up of my face. I apologize. I haven't been looking at the screen hardly at all. Sorry about that. If that's hello. Um, but all of this comes back to the same set of moral values that are being pushed onto us as a people by the same group of entitled men who, now that it has been out, it's been well known for years, some of the principal names involved in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. We've known about Donald Trump for all these years. He got reelected with the Epstein files hanging over his head. He got elected with people telling, oh, wow. I'm sorry to see that, Diane. With all these people telling these people, "Oh, we're going to release the Epstein files and and you're going to see all the Democrats are involved in it." Then he actually had the opportunity to do something, to actually get it done, and he dragged his feet, and only now that they actually forced him to come out with it. Now are people coming out with, are we seeing people confess that, I think maybe Donald Trump might be in these Epstein files because he's just as bad as Bill Clinton. I mean, I'm sorry. Have you been living under a fucking rock? I mean, where have you been? This has been known the whole time. But it's just like that Saturday Night Live sketch. I'm sure you've seen the one, the confession where the woman confesses to her children that she thinks maybe this Donald Trump, but maybe Donald Trump isn't quite all that we were sold he was. Maybe sometimes the things he says aren't necessarily true. And I've been stewing about this now for a few days. You guys have seen that I've started to post. Well, maybe you have or haven't. If you follow me on TikTok, you know that I started to post every once in a while I'm on my morning walks, about 3 times a week since I've been working out of St. George. I try to do a 2-hour walk. And during that 2-hour walk, I practice, out loud sometimes embarrassingly so. Um, Things I'm going to sermonize about, or things that I'm going to be talking about in upcoming TikTok videos or things like this. I use it as a chance to clear my head, recite some things out, see and hear how they sound out loud. And one that I've been thinking about for a while is that I ought to be doing a godless sermon, not just for the Church of Horror and people interested, but to the people who believe politically differently from me. as an olive branch. And occasionally I do this. I'll make a message where it's like, this is to reach out. This is part of my outreach to say, I need to go and reach out to people who disagree with me on things like politics, and even disagree with me on God, and even disagree with me on basic values, to be able to say, okay, you and I disagree, but can we at least come together to talk about this from a moral perspective? I'm Joe. I'm an atheist preacher, not that you care. But I want you to stop and consider something for a minute. Your children one day will remember what you did now. And they will tell their children, if they have them, I thought I knew my mom. I thought I knew my dad. But in the moment when the Epstein files happened, I discovered an entirely different thing about them, about what they think about what men like Jeffrey Epstein did to children. And that will color their perspective for the rest of their lives about everything they did growing up and everything you did growing up. All of a sudden, it's going to cast in a different light every time that you made a comment about what they were wearing. But then they're going to remember. But then when the Epstein files came out, they defended those guys and said, well, I'm sure it wasn't that bad, or I'm sure everybody does that, or that's just locker room talk. All men talk about them. You guys ever watch Comedy Central back in the day? Remember Jordan Klepper did that show Jordan Klepper Fingers the Pulse? Oh, it started out of the Daily Show. It's all the Daily Show at that point. And he would go and he went out and he talked to people about, of all things, remember the Billy Bush conversation, the Entertainment Tonight conversation, the famous grab them by the pussy conversation, got excused as locker room talk. And he would ask these women who were standing in line, they're like, what do you think about Donald Trump saying this about like grabbing women by the, and they'd say, and these conservative women, these Heritage Foundation type women would say, well, that's locker room talk. All men talk that way. Men are like that. Men are disgusting. Men are pigs. They always talk about young women that way. They're always talking about that. And whether or not they knew that they were saying it, they were talking about the Epstein files. They were talking about exactly what we're seeing at the Epstein files. And they're like, all men are like that. Men are all pigs. And he said to them, is your husband like that? Are you married? Well, yeah, I'm married. Does your husband do that? Well, no, he doesn't do that. Do you have sons? Well, yes, I do have a son. He's like, does he talk like that? Well, no, my son doesn't talk like that. Well, then it's not all men now, is it? It's just Donald Trump and a handful of other people. Now, if they had been saying, and maybe they did, it ended up on the cutting room floor. Well, that's no different than the things that Bill Clinton was doing, the things that Bill Clinton did. That's fair. I mean, no matter how you feel about it politically, morally speaking, that's true. There is nothing that Donald Trump did or said or was alleged to have said or done that is really entirely morally any more base and untoward than the things that Bill Clinton did. Arguably, it may be that Bill Clinton is worse. And it's just Donald Trump talks more about it. And maybe Bill Clinton did worse. It's very plausible. Not only that, but there are other liberal men, Democrat men, who have been involved in this, and women who have been involved in the same scheme. And we don't know how much they knew or didn't know yet. That's still yet to come out. But then I've been troubled by the same thing politically. I think a lot about politics, and I'm not here to tell you how to vote or what to vote for, who to vote for, or what to vote for. I don't know myself what I'm going to vote for. And frankly, it's been 3 years. No, let's see. No, 10 years. Oh, man. You know how you ever seen that meme that says, I still feel like the 90s were 10 years ago? Yeah. Anyways, I still feel like 2016 was 3 years ago. No, it's almost 10 years. It's going on 10 years. I have not been a registered member of any political party. I don't really believe in political parties anymore, personally. And the thing that turned me off on it was to see how the Democratic Party lined up behind a candidate that was not Bernie Sanders when Bernie Sanders was the popular candidate. And watching as the news media started to make wisecracks about why are there anybody showing up to Bernie Sanders rallies, and at the time when Bernie Sanders had the largest rallies in the country. Donald Trump couldn't put together a rally the size of Bernie Sanders rallies there for a minute. And we said, this is it. There were so many of us who supported Bernie, who said, this is it. This is our moment. We're going to get somebody into office who really cares about these people, and it's going to be Bernie. We were so excited. And we were getting into it. And then the whole party turned against him because the establishment told them to. And so many people ended up holding their nose and voting for Hillary instead. And she not only won that primary, frankly, she won the election when it came to popular vote because the party had that much power. But the principles, the morals of the principles, people driving the party at that time were supporting all of these corporate movements, these billionaires who are now coming out as dirty in the Epstein files. And it turns out that MAGA people are vindicated a little bit in saying there's nothing you accuse us of doing, accuse our luminaries, our principles of doing, that yours aren't doing too. And turns out that's not unfair because it wasn't about Democrat and Republican when it came to the decisions that were being made out there. It's about spoiled rich boys doing what spoiled rich boys always end up doing. And so when I said, when I started to shape this whole concept in my head about, I'm going to make a TikTok and a short, and we're going to promote it a little bit here to remind these people in this moment, people who disagree with me, and remind them in this moment, it matters that you say something. You may think that you can just wait it out, and it's a little embarrassing now, but if you just wait, somebody will come in and push this out of the Overton window, or not the Overton window, but push it out of our attention. And when they push it out of our attention, you won't have to be held accountable for it. But it's important for you, if you have children, to remember this, especially on a moral issue like what happened with the Epstein files, what's happening in the Epstein files. Your children are going to remember. And like I said, every comment you made about their bodies, it's like, oh, you have such cute little shoulders, or you have such a nice figure. Even things that in your mind at the time you may have thought were just innocent comments, just being polite, being friendly, or being caring, are going to suddenly be tainted with. But then when it turned out that when the Epstein files came out, and I said to mom, or I said to dad, did you see what has come out in the files, in the Epstein files? They wouldn't even look at it. They wouldn't even hear me say anything. As soon as I said something about it, they were like, why you always got to be so negative? I don't buy any of that. I don't believe any of that. Women just, it's just that women some women are just filthy like that. They'll do anything. They'll give some men whatever they want. These are comments that I'm hearing. There was a woman on TikTok. I made a stitch on one of her videos. No, what do you call it? Anyways, I made it. I put me into her video. What do you call that? Anyway, I'm so old these days. Um, and it was her talking basically about the Epstein Islanders. And she said, and she started out with this video that said, 15-year-old girls are having sex every day. When she came out, called out with that comment, and I thought, wait a minute, who is this person? What are they getting at? And she's talking about, well, they're going out there, and she said, she moved on. She's like, they've got their asses hanging out of their shorts. I was like, oh, one of these people. And she says, and they're out there thinking about it, doing it, and you don't have the same. And then she comes out and she's like, and you Democrats don't have the same energy about that. And I said, what does that have to do with Democrats? Do you think it's only Democrats, kids? It's the same. I saw this other video, this guy who said, that I responded to on TikTok. I do a lot of that on TikTok. Those of you who don't want your life dominated by this type of stuff, don't follow me on TikTok. Where he says, I want to ask you Democrats something. Where do morals come from? I made a reply because, as a herald of reason, it's my point to stand up for reason. And I said, you missed us and hit the Democrats with that. You said Democrats. I think you meant atheists. This got nothing to do with Democrats. They don't get to speak up for morals. The Democrats, what do Democrats have to do with morals? If they're Democrat or Republican, you still be a good person, supposedly. That's about God. It's a question you're trying to start about where do morals come from? That's a question about objective morality and whether or not objective morality exists. And you're steering that obviously towards atheists, but you put Democrats on it. And it's like, you think all Democrats are atheists? I got news for you, sir. Don't we atheists who have voted Democrat in the past, don't we wish that all Democrats were atheists? But it turns out a lot of Democrats believe in God. And it's been that way the whole time. Of course it has. From the foundings of whatever you want to call the beginning of the modern Democratic Party, Democrats have been Christians predominantly, and some Jews, and yeah, sure, some atheists. But we atheists were everywhere. There are Republican atheists, believe it or not. I still have trouble sometimes. But to look at this and say, I'm going to defend my political side, my political half, by choosing to ignore the Epstein files, by choosing to ignore that spoiled rich boys, when they are left to their own devices, tend to do the same dirty shit over and over again. And to look at it and say, I'm just not going to pay attention to it because that's emotionally bad for me right now, is to neglect the fact that your children are watching what you're doing right now. And there will come a day where you won't be able to take it back. And this was the lesson. I know there are going to be some people who really hate that I'm about to bring this up, but I'm about to bring this up again. In the 1940s, I know, just hear me out, okay? Just hear me out. In the 1940s, after fascism fell in Europe, just hear me out, okay? When people asked their parents, their parent generation, who voted for these men, voted for the fascists, voted the fascists into power, why did you do it? And they said things like, this wasn't a direct quote that anybody knows of, but it was kind of extrapolated from a lot of the responses of people. They said he kept the trains running on time. They said he didn't, you have to understand that we were poor. They said, you have to understand that times were really hard for us. You have to understand that At that time, all we could see was that the world was falling into moral decay, and all the values we were brought up with weren't part of the world as we saw it. I didn't recognize my country anymore. This is the rhetoric that led to the rise of fascism, and frankly, it left an emotional generational scar on the countries of Europe that never fully healed. It became the talking point of every generation after that, to compare the greatest of evils that we saw with what happened in Germany in the 30s and 40s, what happened in Italy in the 30s and 40s. It's just like what you saw in Czechoslovakia back in the 30s. It's just like what you saw in Ukraine. It's just like what you saw in Poland. It's just like what you saw in Sweden. It's just like what you saw in France in the 1930s and 1940s. You saw this exact thing happen, and we compare the badness of things by what happened then, because there was a concerted effort after the war to remind our children this happened for a reason. For our ancestors now, our grandparents, most of us, or great grandparents, wanted to record forever. We were not innocent. They were not innocent. The difference was that they went harder for these values. And these were the values that created the Holocaust. These were the values that created devastation in Europe. These were the values that created this racist agenda. And don't forget, it doesn't take more than a generation to decide to forget those lessons and and wind up repeating them. That was Ronald Reagan's message when he was president. This is not one side of the political party. Once upon a time in my lifetime, I have lived to see Republicans and Democrats, people of all political stripes in this country, agree with this one point. The Holocaust was bad, and nobody should have to have lived through that. And yet, I got into the live. I'm sure I'm going to start getting comments from his people now. I was on last night on Kai Schwemmer's. You guys remember Kai Schwemmer? I did a Charlatans Never Change about him a few weeks ago, about how this guy pushes these right-wing fascistic ideas to his base, and he is directly connected in working with Scott Pressler here in Utah on overturning Prop 4 here in Utah. If you don't know, Prop 4 was an initiative, a ballot initiative, passed a few years ago here in Utah when we, the voters in the state of Utah, right and left, saw that our congressional districts were being heavily gerrymandered. And so there was an initiative passed here in Utah that created an independent commission to draw our congressional maps so that they wouldn't be so badly gerrymandered. And it was a rare, really good agenda, a really good political move for Utahns. And when they tried to gerrymander the maps again, a judge was in the case where the Republican Party was sued over it. I don't remember if it's the Republican Party itself or the anyways. When the state was sued over it, effectively, the establishment was sued over it. This judge came in and said, "Oh yeah, they can. Yeah, according to this law that was passed by ballot measure here in Utah, this new map isn't effective anymore. It's got to be the one that was put together by the commission." And lo and behold, they were able to undo the gerrymandering that was happening on Capitol Hill in Salt Lake City. And now the same guy, Scott Pressler, that they got to try and flip these what do you call them? These purple states during the 2020 election and 2024 elections, that the guy that took that $1 million from Elon Musk to flip districts over to Donald Trump, That same guy is out here in Utah working practically full time, getting funded. I don't know that anybody even knows exactly fully from what sources as of yet, being funded to try and overturn this ballot initiative that was voted on and decided by the will of the people of the state of Utah, by voters in this same state. Who, by the way, does anybody remember in that same ballot initiative, the voters of this state, yes, old Mormon dominated Utah, decided to decriminalize marijuana? Is that same ballot. And by the way, we don't want gerrymandering. You think of Utah as a Mormon place, and that makes sense because we got a lot of Mormons here. And when the Mormon church says jump, our legislature says how freaking high. Our governor's mansion says, tell me how freaking high. Yeah, absolutely they do. But when a ballot initiative goes out to the voters in the state of Utah, you get another thing. Turns out the people in this state are sick and tired of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints deciding our political future. There are people in this state, and not a few, who are sick and tired of Mormons telling all of us what the laws of our state should be. And when ballot initiatives go out to them, lo and behold, you look at the numbers, the way it breaks down. People who are voting Republican, people who vote for Mormon candidates also vote for these other measures, that they don't want gerrymandering, that they don't want the criminalization of marijuana, that they, it turns out there's no way that these decisions about not letting the church dictate our politics to us, there's no way that it's only being made by non-Mormons. It turns out the Mormons are standing with us more and more. That there are Mormons in our state who go to church and sit in the pews with people who rant and rail about marijuana as a gateway drug, who don't want marijuana to be criminalized. They want it decriminalized. There are people who sit in the pews with other people who defend ICE efforts all over the country, who are sitting in the pews next to them going, I'm an immigrant, or my husband is an immigrant, my family are immigrants. I posted recently on TikToks, on Tickety Talks. Boy, do I feel like an old person today. It's this whole computer problem I had earlier. You guys saw. Anyways, I posted one of the things I've been doing lately is I've been reposting the efforts of people who are in financial distress and saying, guys, this is a person I don't know. I just found them. Their story is very compelling, compassionate. I'd like to ask that people do us all a favor, do yourselves a favor. Let us all do the right thing here and throw in $1, throw in $5 to help this person. In one case, one of them was a single mom who is ex-Mormon and lives near where I am now here in Utah County, and talking about how difficult it was to leave her husband and the financial problems she's had since she left her husband and left the church. Up here in Utah County, even in cases like my own family, when people find out that you are in economic distress because you're getting divorced, their first resort of advice or help before people reach out and give help is to say, did you go to the church for help? That's the system here in Utah. And when women especially leave their husbands in this community, and oftentimes it winds up being when they leave the church as well. And they say, well, I don't really believe in the church. I'm asking you for help because you're my dad, or I'm asking you for help because you're my friend. I'm asking you for help because you're my landlord. And I thought we had a relationship that doesn't have anything to do with the church. I would hope it had nothing to do with the church. And lo and behold, it turns out you end up with people whose landlords tell them, if you want me to give you a little bit of help, give you a little bit of leniency on rent, I want to see that you've gone to the church. And you don't believe in the church anymore isn't an excuse. And my heart broke for this woman. And I said, and I messaged her and I said, do you have a Venmo? And she said, yeah, I don't really like to do that, to ask people. I said, I get it. I get that it's that it's a pride hit. I do. But I think I can get some people to help you out if you can put your Venmo on your account. I'm not going to ask you to give it to me and have me pass it out. If you put it on your account, I think I can get a few people to help you out a little bit. And I posted on TikTok, say, guys, this woman has put her Venmo up in her account, which she was planning to do. Other people had been asking her. And I said, if you watch her videos, it's heartbreaking how she gets up there before the whole world and cries. She full on publishes videos of her crying about how she's so sick and tired of being stressed about money. If you guys could help her out, I'm going to pitch in a little bit to help out. If you can help her out, it would make a big difference for this person. That was in case of an ex-Mormon person that I met, that I found on TikTok. Then just a week ago, I did a similar video for a woman, or earlier this week, I should say, for a woman who is a Vietnamese, she's of Vietnamese extraction, whose husband was picked up by ICE and detained in spite of the fact that he's not an undocumented immigrant. He has papers. He has a visa. And he was moved to detention in Las Vegas in spite of the fact that he has a visa. I can't emphasize this enough. The man is in this country legally. And the attorney she had hired came to the government and said, you need to let this guy out, not only because you have no reason to detain a person who is not illegal, quote unquote, but because he is going to miss his visa hearing if he doesn't get released in time. And if he misses his visa hearing, then he actually will become undocumented. And that in the course of that, they realized that not only was ICE, not only was the Department of Homeland Security aware that that was the case, they were banking on it. They arrested him, a person who is a legal immigrant, quote unquote, and are holding him to make him illegal, to make him undocumented. And to get him out of that was going to cost her, in attorney's fees alone, was going to cost her $15,000. And she said, and in the meanwhile, we're trying to survive. She and her little boy, their little boy, trying to survive just to make it to the next hearing. She says, we need to raise $16,000. And I am to post on my TikTok, which only has 6,000, I guess now, followers, and say, guys, I know that this is a small effort. We're just a small community, mainly of Korahors and other people, atheists, Exmos, and so forth. Just me and my friends in the TikTok world. Would you help this woman out? Would you help out this family? She's raised $6,000 so far. She needs to raise $16,000 just to get her husband out so that he can make it to his visa hearing so he doesn't become undocumented. And within a couple of days, I'm not claiming purely because of us and our efforts. Within a couple of days, she had $18,000, I think, in that account, in her GoFundMe. And she was able, last update we had is that she said, we're waiting now to see if they're going to release him in time. And I'm not taking credit for this because this woman, she had help from a lot of different sources. But I had contact from several people on TikTok who said, thank you so much for posting about that woman. It occurred to me after we had done this, that they had sent to me, because they said, I did give $25 to her GoFundMe. It broke my heart to see what happened to that woman. Or I gave $5 or I gave $10 to help that woman. And so I know that at least some of that was us. And it made me feel great that I said this, I want you guys to all know how proud I am of you, how proud I am of people for stepping up and caring and having an open heart and a caring heart to care about another human being. This is what this is about. This is what I mean when I say we need a moral revolution in this country. We're in moral crisis. There are good people in this world. And a lot of us are atheists, but not all of us. But rather, regardless of that, we need to work together, because this is, until this crisis is over, which who knows when that will be or if that will be. Until this crisis is over, this is all we have. We have each other. That's it. And I want to tell you guys how much how appreciative I am of that. And it was then at that moment that I realized I didn't know whether this woman was Mormon or not. And I thought, of course, as you do, who cares? Who cares? She lives in Salt Lake. Obviously, she might be Mormon. And a lot of people who live here in Utah who are immigrants, like this family, are Mormons because they come to Utah to the Holy Land. It's been that way. Utah exists because of people, immigrants who came from other places, other countries around the world, and came from America back to this place before it was America, and came here and established here and settled here, which is the polite way of saying conquered, and settled in this place. And and it's been one of the great moral quandaries of the Mormon church out here to be able to say that they want to support the MAGA movement, which by and large, Mormons out here are Donald Trump supporters. They want to support him, but it is a church established by immigrants. This is a community where immigrants have played a key role in establishing the church and in establishing this place. And it's been one of the major problems for the Mormon church, because the more they try to assert their dominance in the political system, is the more that white, accomplished, connected, wealthy Mormons start to dictate policies that hurt immigrants and hurt even their fellow members of their church. And now the church has to make a statement saying, can we all get along? And it never fails. Every time immigration enters back into, which is frequently, as you've noticed, into policy decisions, the church makes a statement, increasingly either stronger or weaker, makes some statement about, hey, let's all remember that immigrants are all children of God too. Because so many members of the church are immigrants. And they have to, and it turns out if you got immigrants paying your tithing, you suddenly have to start caring about whether or not immigrants are being treated well, regardless of the personal feelings of the spoiled rich boys who run the church, of which they just put another one in, who happens to be a guy who used to work for Larry Summers. I'm not saying that that means that he's tied in directly to Epstein Island. I've never said that. I've disclaimed that from the beginning. I don't know. What does it mean? Probably nothing. Except this. Spoiled rich boys from Harvard run this country. And they run the church. Not just our church. The church here. Not our church. Our church has got no Harvard people in it, but that's mainly because it's just me and you guys. But Harvard runs the Mormon church, is run by spoiled rich boys who went to Harvard and Yale and Princeton and happened to go to BYU at some point. Hell, that's even Mitt Romney's case, if I remember right. And yeah, where did Mitt Romney go? I'm trying to remember. Anyways, I think he went to Harvard. Yeah. And it matters that when the Jeffrey Epstein movement, when the Jeffrey Epstein scandal was going on, you have the same players that are in both Democratic and Republican administrations, and also are in primary roles in these organizations that are supposedly dictating our morals. And the Heritage Foundation's not innocent from there. I'm telling you, as we get into this, the more I get into this, is the more I see these guys. I see the same characters that are 2 degrees away from the people that are getting called out in the Epstein files, which might mean that they had nothing to do with it at all. 2 degrees could be a great distance, but sometimes it's not great at all. It's just a way of hiding the fact that they're actually 1 degree. They're actually directly connected into it, and it's surprising who those people are sometimes. And you don't know if you're going to find out who is dirty in the Epstein files, you got to be willing to look 2, 3, 4 degrees away and say, there are too many people over here for this to be coincidence. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Something's happening here. And so when we have organizations like the Heritage Foundation saying that they want forced marriage camps where people who are cohabitating are forced to go through some kind of re-education camp, basically, to convince them to live as if they want to get married and to live as if they're going to get married. And by the way, you are going to get married. And because that is the morally right thing to do, it makes a difference that these organizations actually are organizing, actually fundraising, actually hiring, actually getting connected. Because when they get enough money and political power and enough of the same spoiled rich boys into their organization and connected to their organization, whatever devious thing they want, they get. And it can move on a dime. 2004, we didn't expect. Most people found the things that they were talking about in Project 2025 as totally laughable. It was like, how do they expect to get that done in a modern America? In a modern America, how do they expect to get these new anti-choice laws passed? In America, even in red states in America, no, they're not going to get it done. And then lo and behold, they got it done right away. Right away. They're talking about putting together, raiding parties of ICE agents to go and just round people up and not even care whether or not they're American citizens, not even care whether or not they're documented. Like that would ever happen in a like that. They had it. It matters when spoiled rich boys get together and decide what's morally right to do. And they're never going to just sell it as, well, this is what the dear leader has said we're going to do, so that's what's going to happen. It doesn't matter to them whether or not that is true. And Mike Pence learned that the hard way. Now Mike Pence is siphoning off their staff at the Heritage Foundation because the same people who were shouting, "Hang Mike Pence," in 2021 while they were storming the Capitol building were the same people who followed Nick Fuentes out of the MAGA movement, or staying in the MAGA movement but staying quiet. And Mike Pence understands that and sees that the moral leaders inside the religious conservative moral movement in America, the former moral majority, as it's been run, has been entirely corrupted. That they are Epstein Island dwellers from top to bottom. The same people who are caught up in this scheme are the ones who are running everything right now in terms of dictating the morals of an entire generation. And I was telling you last night I was watching Kai Schwimmer's show. And I happened to leave a couple of comments about it. And he's doing a Valentine's Day show. He's like, here I am, another Valentine's Day, and I don't have anybody. And he said, guys, can you believe that? I've never had a girlfriend on a Valentine's Day. And I happened to throw in there as Hellfire Agency because it doesn't bring up the Church of Korihor in there. It just brings up Hellfire Agency in the chat. I said, yeah, I do buy that. And he called me out actually, and he's like, "Hey, Hellfire Agency, that's actually mean. I was just saying that as a joke. Don't say something like that." And I'm like, "No, I totally get it, right? We've seen this. How many boys took to Reddit, took to the internet, and started griping and moaning. All I did was vote for Donald Trump, and now my girlfriend says she's going to leave me. Can you believe that? Yeah, I can. I totally can. But okay. But look, the guy, you made your bed. Now you got to lie in it. It's not so bad. You'll be fine. Do a little growing up. You'll be fine. And but Kai Schwimmer was, as you guys know, if you watched my charlatans episode about this guy, he basically he throws up a whole bunch of how how bold do I feel right now? He throws up a bunch of Nazi Nazi shit, Nazi slogans and shit, and it, he should be relegated to the fringe of society. Here in Utah, this anti-Prop 4 measure that's being paid for by the same group, by your same basic group of Epstein Island / Heritage Foundation people. This guy, Scott Pressler, is going around doing speaking tours, and this Kai Schwimmer kid is one of the speakers that he's taking around in Utah trying to convince these Mormons to vote to overturn Prop 4, and a ballot initiative voted for and passed by the voters of this state. And I got on last night, who knows if he'll ever see it, and found contact info for Scott Pressler and sent him a message with that live stream that I was watching and said, I know you and I don't agree. I know that we don't politically align, but I want you to know I'm pointing out that this guy that you're using to push to convince people in this state, particularly conservative Mormons, to vote to overturn Prop 4 is this guy. Listen to what he's saying. Just a quick recap in case you're not clear. This Valentine's Day show he did last night that I was explaining to Scott Pressler, who knows if he'll ever see it. I said he questions whether or not the Holocaust really happened. He questions whether or not the Holocaust was really that bad. And he suggests that the Holocaust happened a long time ago, and in a country that's not even this country, nobody should even be talking about it. I said, that's your boy. That's your boy you're dragging around up and down the state, trying to convince conservative MAGAs and Mormons to rally around your initiative to overturn Prop 4. And if you think that nobody's going to notice and nobody's going to pay attention, then you obviously don't know who I am and don't know that I'm talking about it. And from a moral standpoint, never mind politics. Vote how you want. Vote how most of you don't even live in Utah, as I understand it. I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm telling you this is a moral crisis. We are a nation in moral crisis because we have failed to learn the lesson that when we let the same Epstein Islanders make all the decisions, lo and behold, they want child brides. Lo and behold, they want sex with people that are younger and younger. And there's no bottom. There's no bottom to the moral depravity of the Heritage Foundation. There is no bottom to it. They will go for younger and younger people. They will try to marry your daughters off younger and younger. They will try desperately to make sure that no young people get a college education in this country unless those people are politically, religiously, and economically connected to the agenda of the same families that have been running the Heritage Foundation since its start. This same group of people, they love child brides. The same group of people would bring back polygamy if they could. They would, and they love it. And they hate when somebody points out, just like the Mormon church hates that somebody points out that Mormon polygamy particularly is trafficking. Go off, send Tim Ballard to knock down 1 billion doors in Colombia or in Haiti looking for trafficking that's not happening, at least not happening where he's going. It's not happening, and he's not actually busting anybody up. But then, but it's all just moral signaling for a group that doesn't want to admit that trafficking has been happening here this whole time, right under their noses. I went to Colorado City just a couple of weeks ago, which is what it's called in Arizona, on the Arizona side of the border. It's Hilldale, Utah, on this side of the border. I went there, and you could see the devastation, the results of Mormon trafficking. They called it polygamy. It was trafficking. That's what it was the whole time. It's been happening under their noses. It wasn't until the Mormon Church kicked out Tim Ballard that he first started to make little signals about, well, it does happen here too. Are you kidding me, dude? Are you kidding me? It's been happening under your nose the whole time, and you can't tell me you didn't know. There is no bottom to the moral depravity. And it's important now because there's an actual possibility right now that the future of this country might change as people begin to realize every person who defends the Epstein Islanders, every person might actually be a part of it. They might be defending it because they're afraid of their name coming out in connection to it. And that's worth paying attention to, because if the attention of the media, if the attention of education, if the attention of churches, all it takes is one or two of these institutions to start shining its light on a constant basis on, do you see how they told us they were against this and it turns out they were for it? Do you see how they're positioning? It's all hypocrisy. And to do it for long enough for a whole generation of Americans to realize, to learn the hard way, that your children, your grandchildren, your descendants, long after you are dead and buried in the ground, are going to remember that you were on the wrong side of history. If you don't want that, you got to confess. You got to do just like that Saturday Night Live sketch. If you guys haven't seen it, the confession, the mom's confession, it's great. You're going to have to do that. You're going to have to come out and say, do you want this to be real or not? If you don't know, if you haven't seen it, you've missed out. Do you want this to be real or not? It turns out that maybe he hasn't been entirely honest with us. Oh, gee, you think? Maybe he's not a very good person. Oh, wow. Maybe it's time to start taking an account for the fact that you can make a mistake. And especially since since last week's sermon where I did dudes who divorce, I think it's time we are finally seeing the confluence of the crisis of masculinity, as it is known, also known as the male loneliness epidemic, and this spiritual crisis from people who have embraced the politics of the Heritage Foundation, finally coming to a head as the same problem. Is that you have some people who claim to believe in Jesus Christ, some people who claim to believe in the Ten Commandments, whether the Jewish version or the Christian version, which are not the same. People who claim to believe in so-called family values, people who claim to believe in the so-called nuclear family, who really believe in the Epstein Island values. That there are people that these people are one and the same. They're the same group of people. And their morals aren't everything that they had expected to be. And that one of the greatest crime that has been perpetrated on the MAGA movement and people who have followed what is really a cult. is that they got convinced that they couldn't possibly be wrong. In spite of the fact that wasn't that the whole thing that Christianity was supposed to be about? Wasn't Christianity supposed to be about how everybody's wrong to some extent? Everybody is a sinner, and especially that the hypocrites were the sinners. They should look to yourself and purge your own sins. That how dare you point out the mote in your brother's eye when you have a beam in your eye? Those Christian values are out. The Christian values that are in are: you are right if you echo the sentiments of the Heritage Foundation. You are right if you echo what you hear at the rally, if you repeat it in church. You are right and everybody else is wrong, and there will never be consequences for siding with this moral majority, with this moral rightness. And you will never have to pay a price for that, because you obviously are right. You heard it here. We told you that you were right, and you got so comfortable with that that when it came out that the same people who are being exposed on Epstein's island are the same people who are making those same claims to you, now you're going to have to live with the consequences. You made your bed and you're going to have to lie in it. And your kids are watching. And I don't think enough people are seeing this. While in the midst of that, I would have to say the most important message that I don't think Democrats are going to pick up and carry. I don't think that the news media is going to catch up and carry. I don't think anybody's really going to pick up and carry this. And I feel like there is a gap in our collective consciousness and our collective conscience in this country that I'm saying, Jesus, it probably falls to me, I think, because I don't know that anybody else is going to say it. You have to give yourself some room to change and to be wrong. And the religious, moral, spiritual, political lie that ever told you, no matter what side you stand on, that you can't possibly be wrong. You put the right letter after your name. You vote for the right people. You donate to the right foundations. So you are obviously a good person, and that means you can't possibly be wrong. It turns out that those people don't have your best interest at heart. And you need to be able to look to yourself and say, am I just as bad? Does it not matter what team I am playing for here? Turns out you're a bad person if you're a bad person, and then say that doesn't have to be anybody's permanent situation. Being a bad person is not a one and done thing. The things you do over the course of your life, cumulatively, are going to be the things that matter. The things that you are remembered for are going to be the things that matter. And now the moment is passing you by. Every moment that you don't tell your children, I look at what happens. I'm aware of what's happening in the Epstein files, what's coming out from those things. I'm aware of it. And I am checking to see how I may have backed the wrong person in the past. I may have been involved in something I don't morally support. And I am paying attention. And I want you to know so that you don't forget, so that you know now in the moment when it's happening, when there's this moral shift happening and people are being struck, our collective conscience is being struck in America, to sit here and say to you before the moment has gone by that I feel bad about the choices I've made in the past. And your children can only respect you more. Your grandchildren can only respect you more. Your fellow Americans can only respect you more if you have the courage of your convictions and have the courage to stand up to the most difficult person in life to stand up to, and that person is you, the you of the past that you are going to naturally tend to want to defend and say, I had it right then and I have it right now. That the real act of courage is being able to expose yourself and say, I made a mistake. I thought this was right, and it turns out I was wrong, and it's embarrassing. But somebody who's done a lot of that can tell you it's some of the most important work you'll do in your life is to admit you were wrong. I regret votes I took in the past. I do it all the time. I cast my vote for people I don't support anymore. I was young, I was stupid. I used to tell people I was young and I needed the money. That was a joke back then. That was funny back then. Now it's not so funny. But, I voted for George Bush in 2004. I'm not proud of it. It's one of the great moral crises in my life to look back and go, Jesus, did I really? Who was I even back then? Yeah, I have to give myself the room in my heart, in my mind. Yes, that matters. Yeah, it matters how you think about yourself internally. I have to give myself this room to be able to say, I was 24 years old. I didn't know shit about shit in the world. I just gotten back from a mission for the Mormon Church in South America. I had barely come to realize in my naive mind, my young mind, that the world is not what I thought it was. And I had only barely begun to experience that when at 23, 24 years old or whatever it was, when the election actually happened. Yeah. When I began to realize that I was going to have to make a decision about who I supported and what the future of not only the country but the world should look like. And the outcome of that decision in 2004 included the Iraq War, included the damage and harm done to people who are now veterans of our armed forces, and the incredible massacre that happened all throughout the Middle East, and the terrible economic policies of the Bush administration, of the second Bush administration. And when I look back on it now, I realize how very guilty I ought to feel that I stood on that side at that time. But I can't change that, can I? I can only make another decision to go forward and do better and to admit to somebody when the time comes. I once made a decision that was wrong, and I feel badly about it. I'll never make that decision again. Or just to inform somebody, I want you to be aware in case in the future you look back on your interaction with me and wonder about who I was, that I fully admit and acknowledge, understand that I was wrong. Among ex-Mormons, we have these mugs, these coffee mugs and T-shirts and things that are screen printed with little sayings on them. And one of the most common sayings ex-Mormons have is, I am so sorry for the shit I said when I was Mormon. That may seem like like just a joke. I would challenge any of you who have ever seen this. If you've ever seen one of these mugs or one of these T-shirts out in the wild, you see somebody wearing something that says, I'm so sorry for what the things I said when I was Mormon. Ask them, do you really feel bad about things you said when you were Mormon? Like, ask them, ask us, is that really a thing? Or is that just a joke? You will find, hey, Dave, you will find it's not a joke. There's things I said when I was Mormon that make me blush every time I think about them now. And it's not just things like, I know for a fact, Joseph Rollins, have said in the past, this is a spiritual purge right here. I have said in the past, out of these lips, I know beyond the shadow of a doubt. Sorry. Hold on. I need more liquid nitrogen here in my veins. I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God. It's so much more than that. I can't tell you how many times I have said, I know that the Constitution of these United States is scripture just as much as the standard works. I used to say that. And there would be Mormons sitting in the room nodding their heads. Yeah, that's true. Why did I say that? Why did I do those things? Let's see. I was a child and I saw other people doing it and thought that was the way that you did things. That was the way you understood the world. That's how you came to know the world. And I got confident and cocky because that's something that children do. Because I was immature. Because I didn't understand the world. Because I didn't have children that I was raising. Because I didn't have to explain to my children the choices that I made. And if you think that that doesn't change your perspective on the choices that you make in life, you don't really understand what it's like to raise children. When you realize that the people you are bringing up into the world, they don't just outlive you. They preserve the memory of you when you are gone. And the choices you make that they see are important. And it's not just important in the moment and to you. It changes your legacy. It changes your future. It changes the future you made for them. And that's why it's important to talk to your children. Talk to your kids about the Epstein files. You don't, of course, you don't want to do it in a way that's age inappropriate, depending on how old your kids are. But a lot of us have kids who are now not kids technically. I have a daughter who's 19 years old, who I've had to talk to about things and say, "Do you know about what's going on?" You don't have to think about it. You don't have to know all the details of what these people did or are doing. I want you to know this much. I'm seeing what's happening and I am shocked. I am seeing what's happening and reviewing whether or not I supported people I shouldn't have. I've told my son who is 14, you know, there's a man in the world named Noam Chomsky who I had great respect for. There's a man I know of in this world you may be only barely aware of named Bill Clinton, who I had great respect for at some point in my life. And I am disgusted at how it turns out these two men were so closely connected in to the Jeffrey Epstein and what he and this I don't even know what to call it, this scandalous organization of rich boys who think that they could get away with anything. And it doesn't just touch conservatives I may have supported when I was conservative. And it doesn't just touch religious people that we were told were religious and may be religious, and turns out generally are religious, but also are morally depraved human beings. But even atheists now, as I made a video that perhaps thankfully YouTube wouldn't allow me to upload. I had connectivity problems, internet connection problems that day, and so I don't think it fully posted ever. Where I exposed my shame on the fact that I have long supported, even quoted, Lawrence Krauss. And out of the things that I have discovered from the Epstein files, I am disgusted with the things I have learned about Lawrence Krauss. I'm disgusted by this person. I can't believe that's Lawrence Krauss that said that. I've quoted Lawrence Krauss in sermons. I've quoted Lawrence Krauss in my book. I have told people about Lawrence Krauss for years, supported Lawrence Krauss. And when I saw what was actually in the Epstein files and the correspondence between him and Jeffrey Epstein, it struck me, morally speaking. And I said, that's it. He's out. I cannot believe this. I was stunned to learn this about Lawrence Krauss, even about ASU's Origins project, which I very much supported. I was living in Arizona when ASU had the Origins project run by Lawrence Krauss, and I had no idea that it was being financed by Jeffrey fucking Epstein. What? I mean, and it does. It leaves you reeling with, am I an idiot? How did I not know? Can I really claim ignorance? Was this not known? Turns out it was known the whole time. It was known the whole time that the ASU's Origins project was being financed by Jeffrey Epstein. Do you know how many atheists that touches? There were conferences at ASU's Origins conference that featured everybody from Richard Dawkins to Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now, do I think those people were out on Epstein Island? Believe you me, I've looked them up, and fortunately, so far, it looks like no. But boy, right now, I gotta be blunt with you. I'm reviewing everybody. I'm reviewing all associations. I think we all have to. It is only morally right, because I want to make sure that future generations in this country, starting with my own children, understand what, in case it wasn't clear to you, what Jeffrey Epstein and his associates were up to was morally wrong and never should have happened. And that was that moral crisis I feel for anybody who feels it in their hearts and says, man, I guess I have to call it out, in spite of the fact that it's embarrassing to admit that you supported somebody who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein. I would encourage you, I've done this before. Several of you out there hearing this, you're ex-Christians. Several of you are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly. Several of you are ex-Mormons. Mostly those who are hearing me are ex-Mormons like I am. But then some people are going to hear us who've never been any of those things. And so to those people too, let me explain and state, if you've never done this before, leaving a cult hurts. But it's also extremely liberating. It's extremely liberating to leave a cult behind. I did it with Mormonism. Yes, Mormonism is a cult. I understand that hurt some people's feelings. I'm sorry that you're in a cult, and I'm sorry your feelings are hurt. You should get out of that cult. Leaving a cult hurts. But in the end, being ex-Mormon is one of the greatest prides of my life. It's one of the things I am most proud of in my life. There are people in the future who are going to be ex-MAGA, and we're already seeing them. One of my dear friends, you guys know, who is a content creator on YouTube, Jenny Gage, makes content all the time about how she is an ex-white supremacist, ex-MAGA, and ex-Mormon. And there are going to be a lot of people in the future who are going to have to identify that way. Having left a cult behind hurts in the moment. But in the end, it will be one of the things you are most proud of in your life. Because you will be able to look back and say, I don't just claim to be a critical thinker. I don't just claim to be able to repent and recant of something I did and realized later that I was wrong, or something I supported and then realized later that I was wrong. I don't just preach that. I put it into practice, even if it hurts. This will hurt for a while. The Epstein files, they will hurt Republicans and Democrats. They will hurt conservatives and liberals. This will hurt us for a long time. It's good. It's a purging. It's a moral purge that we're going to have to take to be able, if for no other reason than to tell a generation of Americans and tell a generation of human beings coming up in the world, we knew that this was happening eventually. But whether or not we knew from the beginning, once we learned exactly how depraved it was, we put a stop to supporting it. I realized I was wrong, and I left. And some people will say this is about politics. I'm telling you, MAGA is a cult. You look at the things that get said by the Heritage Foundation and how the Heritage Foundation, Mike Pence learned the hard way that he wasn't the head, that he wasn't in charge of a political movement. It was a religion. That's why they had baptisms in the parking lot at MAGA rallies. Baptisms. Okay. It was a cult. It is a cult. And leaving a cult hurts in the moment. But for the sake of your children, you got to do it. As an ex Mormon, to all future ex MAGA out there or people who are ex MAGA now, and maybe whether you're ready to admit to it or not, I understand. And I realize that you probably don't share the same religious and or spiritual values as me, but I want you to know one human being to another, I get it. I get it. You need to give yourself the room to grow. You need to give yourself room to change. You need to remember that you were younger then, or you were less experienced, or that you had been lied to, or that somebody who is good, that you were deceived by somebody who was good at deceiving it. I would encourage you to consider this, what I have said to many Mormons who have left the Mormon church, ex Mormons who have left the Mormon church, and have said to me, as a spiritual leader among ex Mormons, yeah, I am. I've had this conversation again and again. It turns out it gets easy after a while. You learn the same things that every person leaving Mormonism has to hear. And I said, listen to me, okay? You need to give yourself the permission to have been deceived by a deceiver. You need to give your earlier self, your younger self, the room to have been deceived by a charlatan who is good at that. Why? How could I have ever been convinced into believing that? These people, charlatans, this is all they do. Their whole lives are committed to fooling people who otherwise should be completely reasonable human beings, and often are totally rational, reasonable, logical human beings, and convincing them and emotionally manipulating them. And if you think that's limited to Mormonism, you obviously don't know who Mark Driscoll is. Any Mormon will tell you Mark Driscoll is a charlatan. They don't want to tell you it's the same kind of charlatan Joseph Smith was. And they certainly aren't going to tell you that he's the same kind of charlatan that this new apostle, Clark Gilbert is, or that Dallin H. Oaks is the same kind of charlatan. Okay, because it's easy to point out somebody else's charlatans. But these men, they dedicate their whole lives to fooling people who are otherwise totally logical human beings. So you need to give your younger self a little bit of room to say, I was young. I made a poor choice. It doesn't make an excuse. It doesn't excuse what you did. But it is a testament to yourself and your children, to yourself and the people that you care about, the people that you love in your life, to be able to say, I never in my life at any point gave up on myself. I never at any point gave up on myself and the capacity I have to choose to change and to walk away from something that is evil. And I tell people all the time, if it hurts right now when you're leaving the church, If it hurts right now, just remember this. I want you to feel confident in this because as somebody who's been an ex-Mormon for well over 20 years now, I have found it to be consistently true. Of all the things I've done in my life, leaving the Mormon church is one of the best things I ever did. Of all the things I've done in my life, the things I am most proud is that I left the Mormon church. It hurt. It took courage. It wasn't just easy. Sure, there were parts of it that were fun. There are parts of it that were cool. There are parts of it that were nice. And there are parts of it that brought me great relief. But none of it have been worth it for the pain that was involved in leaving the community that I grew up in and loved. Until I left and realized that's how strong the courage of my convictions was, that I wouldn't support something even with my name. I would not support something even with my name that was involved in doing something so evil. Mormon trafficking is real and it's evil. It's not under the surface, it's on the face. They knew it all along. They called it polygamy. They called it building Zion. And we bought into it. We bought into the propaganda because these people are good at this. You got to give yourself some room, man. You were young. You were believing what you were taught. You were believing what you were told. And now you got to move into the future. I would encourage each of you, whether you agree with me or not, on God, on politics, whatever, to review, not in name, but in actual action, review in your heart and in your life if the time has come for you to admit that you were wrong and to walk away. I was just as proud to walk away from the Democratic Party. I was not that I became Republican because I don't know. I don't think I'll ever do that again. But who can say? You have to be able to walk away and say, wow, this wasn't what I was sold on. But it doesn't mean that you stop living. It doesn't mean you stop voting. It doesn't mean that you stop making decisions. It doesn't mean that we see the same thing, by the way. I saw the same thing again in my life with MLM. I worked in network marketing my whole career for what, 15 years at least of it. Yeah. And let me tell you, you see people walk away from network marketing, from MLM, from direct sales marketing, whatever they're going to call it now, whatever they're going to call it next. And for as many people as it really did transform their lives, there's a wake. There's an absolute bloodbath of people that destroyed their friendships, made them feel, isolated. Inside MLM, they have a joke that when you become a distributor for an MLM company, that you join the NFL. That means no friends left. Because believe it or not, lots of us have seen it. And while there are companies that are better than others, and there are companies that are good, and I've worked for some of those companies and have done really good things in the world and really benefited people. Sure, they have, just like the Mormon church has. Sure, there are people who benefited because of Mormonism. Why not? Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it's true about the Church of Scientology too. That doesn't change the fact that there were so many people who were hurt along the way. But then there were some other people. There were some people who, when they left the MLM world, would say, it's like I left a cult. I really feel like I left a cult. Now, I don't know that I ever met anybody who felt that way about Isogenics, which is the company I worked for the longest out of all of them, probably the longest out of all of them. I don't know that I met many people who felt that way about Isogenics because, frankly, a lot of people who liked Isogenics just liked it because they lost weight with it, including me. But I can tell you this, I met more than a few people who left Amway. Amway was. I mean, I know so many people. I've known so many people in the course of my life who their whole life was destroyed by Amway. Same thing with Young Living. Same thing with we're seeing now. I've met more than one person who feels that way about oh, what's the new Young Living? What do they call it? The essential oils, anyways. The other essential oils company, DoTerra. I have I have family who were destroyed by DoTerra, and frankly, whose lives were well, whose lives were upset by DoTerra, shall we say? And frankly, I come from a family that benefited financially from DoTerra, probably more than most. You know, oh, rainbow vacuums, Antiquini. I'll tell you, we have to have a conversation sometime, Antiquini. Well, you and I shall have to have a conversation sometime about how I almost got sucked into Kirby vacuums. I was 16 years old. Anyways, uh, being able to leave a cult doesn't make you having been in a cult doesn't make you weak. I can't stress that enough. Having been in a cult doesn't make you weak, even if it's the MAGA cult. Because if you say, I have been in a cult or I was in a cult, what's also implied in there is that you left. And leaving a cult is one of the most difficult things a person can do. And so to you out there who voted for Donald Trump and regret it, okay, I hardly care. But if you tell me you feel ashamed of supporting somebody or believing the rhetoric of somebody who told you that you were better than other people or that you had a right to be judgmental of other people and that you feel bad about it now. You feel bad that you bought into it. And now you look at yourself and say, I want to believe I can move into a future where my children will know that I feel bad about that I didn't want to do that. I want to make better choices, and that they will remember this. When I had an opportunity to stand up for my personal moral values, they were moral values that were higher value and importance to me than the political and or social and or religious movement I was involved in, and I walked away. I say to you, my friend, good for you, brother. Good for you, my sibling in reason. I'm proud of you. I want every ex-MAGA to know. If the Epstein files were what it took for you to decide you were going to get honest with yourself, you were going to get honest with your children, you were going to get honest with your countrymen about the fact that you feel badly about what you supported now that you see what it was involved in it, good for you. And by the way, I want to say the same to any person who supported Bill Clinton and now has that moral quandary and has to realize, wow, I really did have the wool pulled over my eyes. I'm going to do differently. I'm going to do better. Good for you, man. Good for you, my friend. It takes a lot. It I won't ever diminish it. Some people will joke about these things. This is not a joke. Leaving cults is not a joke. I've seen too many people whose lives were destroyed by it. We here in the Mormon community, greater Mormon community, ex-Mormon community, we've seen people killed over it. This is no joke, man. This is serious fucking business. And I want you to know that if you have decided that you are more moral than the movement you're involved in, go with that energy. Do what's right. And I'm proud of you for it. But first of all, I cannot say this enough. Confess it to your kids. It'll affect their whole life. It'll affect how they remember you. If you're fortunate enough to have children, tell them you were wrong. You will never regret it. Amen.
Wait a minute! This Exmo's got something to say? Oh, big surprise! Oh, fuck off. Golden angels show the fruit, selling Jesus in an Armani suit. Will a man rob God? Holy dividends, turning profits into Caesar's friends. Hosanna shout, shout for Jesus IPO.